Hope everyone's having a really great summer. As we get to the end of the summer, what's about to happen? Kids are about to go back to school, or at least cross our fingers. I hope that's what's going to happen. I know that I am definitely looking forward to my daughter going back to school after she's been home for the last 15 months. But as we start to go back into school time, there are some things that you need to think about, particularly if you're already divorced or if you're separated. Some things that people tend to not think about until an issue comes up. And they are really things that you need to think about before the issue comes up. Because if you wait until the issue comes up, you may not be able to resolve it in any kind of time frame that makes sense. So, and I will tell you this, courts don't really find you waiting to the last minute to address an issue to be an emergency. So you do need to give some consideration to things that come up regularly as kids go back to school. So let's start with the first thing, changes to the parenting time schedule. Now, when you went through your divorce or when you went through your separation from your child's other parent, you came up with a parenting schedule. And it may have been a hard-fought battle to get that parenting schedule. But as what normally happens, children get older. They have, their activities change, their friends change, their needs, their wants, everything changes as they get older. And as we approach another school year, sometimes the schedule you worked out with the other parent doesn't make any sense anymore. Now, don't forget, the parenting schedule isn't for you. It's for your children, right? That's what's most important here, is that you have a parenting schedule that actually is good for your children. So you need to sit down with your calendar, with your children's schedules, and see, does this parenting schedule make any sense? If it doesn't, you need to see if changes are necessary. Now, changes might be, a night here, a night there, or it might be a whole-scale change of the entire parenting schedule. You really don't know until you sit down and you really have that conversation with your child's other parent. And communication is so important. Now, if you were able to resolve your divorce or your custody dispute with mediation, then you already know mediation's a great place to go. But if you can't work it on your own, the worst thing you can do is go to court. You really need to think about how can we sit down and have a calm conversation about what our child's needs are. So the most important thing for you to think about as you're approaching the school year is, do we need to change anything about the parenting time schedule? Oftentimes you do, but I will tell you, people have egos, right? You have this hard-fought battle to get the parenting schedule, so why in the world would you want to change it now? Don't forget, this is for your children. That's what the parenting schedule is for. It's not for you. It's not for the other parent. It's to make sure that they have continuity, they have stability, and that we make sure that they are given the best opportunity to succeed, both academically, socially, emotionally, athletically, however, musically, whatever they're involved with. We need to make sure that we're doing that. The second issue that you want to consider looking at as we approach the school year is child support. Now, child support was based on the incomes of you and your ex-spouse or the other parent. It also took into account union dues, pension contributions, whether or not you were receiving alimony. It took into account how many overnights each parent had with the children. It took into account the cost of health insurance, the cost of any child care. Sometimes child care is not paid within child support, but sometimes it is. And it took all of those things into account to come out with a number. So you can see there's lots of factors there that can change over time. And if there has been a substantial change in any of those factors, child support might need to be reevaluated, because the children are entitled to the proper amount of support. Meaning, if one parent's income went up substantially, the children are supposed to share in that good fortune of that parent. So as we look at child support, you need to think about all those factors. Has anything substantially changed? Has your income gone down substantially? Has your ex-spouse's income gone up substantially? Has alimony stopped? A lot of times alimony is limited in its duration. It doesn't go on forever. Sometimes it's only paid for 4 years or 8 years or 6 years. So as soon as alimony ends, child support needs to be reevaluated. Now, hopefully your attorney put provisions in your agreement to account for that. But if they didn't, you need to certainly have child support reevaluated. Health insurance. Health insurance, the cost to you from your employer, that changes all the time. A lot of times employers are making their employees pay more of the health insurance cost. So if that's you, then you need to be sure that you are looking at what child support was based on, because again, it may not make sense anymore. Childcare. Were you paying for childcare and now you're not anymore, but the child support guidelines had childcare? Those are all the things you need to think about and go look at your child support and see whether or not any of those factors have changed. Because I know a lot of us probably, after the horror of going through a divorce or the horror of going through a custody dispute, the first thing you want to do is just get rid of it and say, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm finished. But you need to always be thinking about these things. Now, another thing, and I'm going to talk about college in a minute, but as you approach college for your kids, child support also needs to be reevaluated. The whole point of what I'm talking about today is don't wait till the last minute. These issues are not surprises. You need to always be looking at where changes need to occur. And I strongly suggest you go to mediation to really talk about these issues if you and your spouse can't work it out yourselves. The third issue is back to school items. So you've got school supplies, you've got clothing, you've got new backpacks. As we approach the winter season, you need new coats, there's new shoes, there's the kids going into all their extracurricular activities. Now you've got, lacrosse shoes, and you've got dance shoes, and you've got leotards for gymnastics. There's a ton of money that gets spent on children. And child support does cover some of it. But you really need to sit and take a long look at your child. Does your child spend a lot more on all of those items than a normal child? If your child's heavily involved in things and they just have a lot more expenses, that's something that you might need to talk to your spouse about. Now, again, everyone likes to concentrate on the law and what the child support guidelines say. But child support, the guidelines, meaning the calculation, the state of New Jersey says that one child costs X if the parents make Y. 2 children cost A if the 2 parents make B. That's based on generalities. It's an average child, an average family. Your specific circumstances are different. That might be a reason you need to take another look at are these things included in child support? And if they're not, should me and my ex-spouse or the other parent be splitting these somehow? Which leads us to number 4, which is extracurricular activities. Now, every year, your child probably is involved in some kind of extracurricular activity. It might be something through the school, it might be something through the local Y or your township, or something private. But if your children are usually involved, don't wait until a week before a season starts to start talking to your ex-spouse or the other parent about that activity. Always be talking about it. Some of these activities are very expensive. I'm thinking about, my daughter was in gymnastics. Gymnastics, you've got monthly fees, which can run $400 a month, and then you've got competition fees, you've got uniform fees, you've got all kinds of fees. And it can add up to $5-6 grand a year. And a lot of people, that's a lot of money. So you need to talk about these things at the very beginning. I'll give you a great example. I'll go back to gymnastics. We had a parent meeting where they went through all these costs with us. If only one of you is there, you need to immediately tell the other parent, this is what's going on. That's how good communication works. And I know for some of you, communication's not easy, but really consider that being a really good thing. And again, if you can't agree on things and you're not seeing eye to eye, and one of you says, no gymnastics, that's too expensive, well, maybe you need to go to mediation and talk about this just a little bit more. If it's something your children have always done, clearly they're going to get to continue to do it unless there's some substantial change. If it's a new activity, then it's really going to be reasonableness. Is it a minimal cost? If so, and minimal impact on everyone's parenting schedules, they're really, if it's a substantial cost or it's a substantial impact on the parenting schedule, I'm thinking like travel sports would be a great example of that. Okay, maybe there is a reasonable objection, but those are still things you should sit and talk about. And this is the time to do it. Right now, we're still at least a month away from the start of school. So don't sit on your tush. Get to work talking about these issues. So now I want to get to some miscellaneous things that you want to think about. Number one, cars. Now, car for your child, car insurance for your child, gas for the car for your child, none of that's included in child support. Okay? None of it is. If your child is on the verge of turning 17 and is of the age they can be driving, and you have not addressed this in your agreement already, and not all of you needed to, because some of you got divorced when your kids were very young, talk about it. All right? Let's be reasonable here. You know, you want your child to have a car because it lets them go get a job. It lets them, drive themselves around instead of you having to drive them around. There's a lot of benefits to having a car, but one parent should not shoulder the entire burden for that. So that's something to start talking about long before your child gets the driver's license. Start talking about it as soon as possible, and this is a good time to do that, particularly if your child's going to get their driver's license during this school year. College. Now, I'm not talking about kids starting college in August of this year, because you should have already talked about it well before now. But what I'm talking about is people starting a year from now. Yes, you need to start talking about it now. You really should have an agreement on everything when it comes to college by Christmas, because if you cannot reach an agreement and you need to get a mediator or a court involved, it's not going to take 2 months. It could take 6 months. It could take 9 months. It could take a year. So you need to start talking about it now. And you need to start talking about where your children are going to go, whether or not you're going to go visit schools, who's going to take your kid to visit schools, what are the pre-college costs that are out there, SAT, ACT classes, prep classes for those, advanced placement tests. Are they going to take any classes at community college in advance? And, how are you going to get your kid to school? Are they going to take a car? That goes back to the car discussion, right? Are they going to take a car? Are they not? How much are you going to make your child pay for school? Are you going to make them take out loans? Or are you and your ex-spouse going to pay everything? There's a lot of things that you need to start to think about, because your child needs to know what they should or shouldn't expect and where they can apply. You don't want your child to be applying to these really expensive private schools if you and your spouse are in agreement that you're capping your expenses at the cost of, Rutgers, let's say. Those are things you need to talk about in advance and try to get on the same page. There's really no reason to fight about it. Typically in New Jersey, as long as you make a middle-class income, the court's going to make you pay something to help your kids go to college. So it's worth having that conversation, and just putting your foot down and saying, I'm not paying anything, it's not helpful, and it's not going to go anywhere. Most people would agree that a lot of kids should go to community college or a county college for a year or two. And that's a conversation you should have with your ex-spouse so that you guys can get on the same page. All right, that's all for today. I just wanted to hop on real quick and make sure that you all were thinking about the things that typically come up as we approach the school year. Let's have an incredible 2021-2022 school year, and I'll see you next time.